Hi, welcome to Live from New York Public Library. My name is Saria Chum and I work with the public programs team at the library, and I am so honored to introduce tonight's event, Pride 2020 Reframing Liberation. This is the final conversation in our Pride Across Generation series. Each conversation this week has highlighted a different generation of LGBTQ artists, writers, and activists. Tonight's talk focuses on the millennial generation and how they understand Pride today. This year, Pride is different. For the first time in its 50-year history, because of the pandemic, the march has been canceled. People are marching, though, and have been since the end of May. A growing movement of people have been taking to the streets to protest police brutality and to affirm that Black Lives Matter nationwide. Today, a rising generation of LGBTQ activists and artists are leading the charge. Joining us for tonight's discussion are two truly amazing individuals who are part of a mighty team that helped organize the Brooklyn Liberation Rally at Brooklyn Museum a couple of weeks ago that drew an extraordinary crowd of 15,000 participants in support of Black trans lives. Our speakers are also changing the game in media, TV, and theater by producing LGBTQ stories that are current, empowering, funny, and inclusive. Joining us today are Ianne Stewart, actor, activist, and founder of the Okra Project. Ianne is a Black, queer, non-binary, trans feminine, New York City-based storyteller. As a performer, Ianne has performed at Joe's Pub and La Mama, Dixon Place, and on television in Pose, The Bold Type, and the upcoming Netflix series Dash and Lily. In 2017, Ianne was selected to be one of 15 US Fellows for Humanity and Action's John Lewis Fellowship. Joining Ianne in conversation is Fran Tirado. Fran is a writer and producer who has held roles at Hello, Mr. Magazine, Out, and Netflix. He also has a podcast called Food for Thought, that's THOT. Finally, moderating tonight's conversation is Lama Rod Owens, a Buddhist minister, author, activist, yoga instructor, and authorized Lama, or Buddhist teacher. He's one of the leaders of his generation of Buddhist teachers. Lama Rod holds a Master's of Divinity degree in Buddhist Studies from Harvard Divinity School. And he is the author of Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger, which recently came out. I'd like to mention briefly about NYPL's terrific LGBTQ collections. The library has one of the greatest collections in the country documenting LGBTQ history, ranging from the records of Mattachine Society, the papers of James Baldwin, to the archives of the New York City Trans Oral History Project. Our collections also include the photographs of pioneering photojournalist Diana Davies. Just recently, 3,000 newly digitized images of Davies' photographs have been made available online, so we encourage you to check that out. I'd like to give a special shout out to Jason Bauman, Assistant Director of Collection Development and Coordinator of the library's LGBTQ initiative. Jason helped to plan the support the planning of this series. Just a quick couple of housekeeping items to address, and then I will magically disappear and make room for our panelists. This talk is being simulcast on Zoom and YouTube. The event is being recorded. I should say that you yourselves are not being recorded. It's just the speakers, Lama Rod, Ianne, Fran, and me are the ones who are being recorded. The speakers would be glad to answer some of your questions. You can do so by following this procedure. If you have a question, type the question in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the Zoom app. We'll make sure the speakers see them, but they may not have the time to answer all of your questions. At the end of the event, we'll be sharing a short 2-question survey with you, and we'd love your feedback if you have a moment. We'll post a link to it towards the end of the event, both in the chat on Zoom and in the comment section on YouTube. If you'd like to learn more about these events and everything else the library is doing, please visit nypl.org/connect, where you can sign up for a newsletter and access the myriad of resources we are making available at this time. With that, I am pleased finally to welcome to our virtual stage, Lama Rod, Ianne, and Fran. Take it away.
welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this really important discussion. Thank you so much for Saria for that lovely introduction. Thank you so much to the staff and the team of the New York Public Library for hosting this really important series of dialogues around pride and liberation. I am so happy to be sharing this space tonight with, I hope, two new friends, yes, two new friends. Yeah, hey. With Ianne and with Fran, thank you so much for stepping into this space. And I, just wanted to kind of begin this gathering. I begin so many of my spaces, my gatherings, with remembering my ancestors, really remembering our ancestors. And I just want to energetically just open this space up and just invite our precious ancestors to join us in the space. And you don't have to know who your ancestors are, but those ancestors who love us, who protect us, who work so hard for us to have the privilege to sit in front of a screen, to talk about liberation, and to do the work of liberation as well. So just opening the space, and I invite you, all the listeners, all of you who are joining, to do the same work, to do the same practice in your space, just opening up your mind, opening up your heart, inviting those beings to come and sit with you, and just to say welcome. Welcome, please have a sit, and let's talk about liberation. And I want to invite Ianne and Fran, both of you, to ask you, who are you calling into the space? Who are your people?
Yeah.
I'll be inviting in my aunt Carol Rice, my dear best friend and now spiritual guide, Bays Olatunde Latif White, Malaysia Booker, Diamond Stevens, Remy Fells, Nina Pop.
I'm thinking about Sylvia Rivera, a fellow Boricua, and a generation of New York-based activists that paved the way so that we could have so many different things, and not so that this ambulance sounding outside my window right now could be blaring, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
And we just take a moment just to allow these precious beings to settle into the space. And we honor them, we remember them, we see them, and we feel them. And we especially remember that we would not be here without their work and without their love. So thank you, everyone. I feel that. I feel the space. It got crowded. So again, welcome everyone. And for the next 40 minutes or so, we're just gonna be talking, kikiing. We're gonna have fun. I'm gonna try to stay focused. Because I have this little box at the side of my screen telling me what to do. So we're gonna stay. We're gonna stay on point.
Realistic.
So I wanted to start with a really obvious area of conversation, and that's liberation. And I want to bring in two more elders right now, one ancestor and one elder. So our ancestor, Marsha P. Johnson, mother Marsha P. Johnson, and she says, quote, "No pride for some of us without liberation for all of us," end quote. And I want to remember Elder Mother Angela Davis when she says, "Revolution is a serious thing, the most serious thing about a revolutionary's life. When one commits oneself to the struggle, it must be for a lifetime," end quote. So my first question, is let's chop it up. What the hell is liberation?
I would love to hear from Ianne first on that one, because it's actually her who kind of, we were workshopping names for last Sunday's action, and she was the one that was like, it's Brooklyn liberation.
I often think back to an interview with Nina Simone, where she is asked to kind of describe what freedom feels like, and she doesn't use so many words, but there's so much that is present within her. And I think that for me, liberation is it is that sense of that freedom, that feel. It's not necessarily something that we can always like name, but it's just something that when you close your eyes and you think of like what keeps you driving, it's that driving force. Liberation is it's the promise of what is to come, and our accountability partner in everything, that it stands with us and stands beside us and stands behind us and stands underneath us wherever we need liberation to be. But it is the promise that we make to ourselves and to others that one day we will feel that sense of freedom, and what Nina Simone felt but couldn't say will finally be given word.
I love that. And for me, as someone who's not Black, I definitely feel like there is it means that there is no liberation for some of us unless there's liberation for all of us. It was something that we kind of kept refraining back to and thinking about Martian, thinking about this action, and how it's just not a part of the definition unless it is for all of us. So yeah, I think about that a lot. I love the Nina reference. That's perfect.
And I guess I want to ask, like, who does our liberation depend on? Like, who's this depend on? Is it just us? Like, we're gonna decide to get free, we're gonna get free? Or do we need to enter into collaboration with someone or something?
Yeah, what I always describe is the difference between a liberational politic and an educational politic, right? I think that educational politic is like, a little bit of like what the Brooklyn Liberation March was that we sat down together in community, right? Like we shared a table, we shared, it wasn't just a table full of Black people, it was a table full of like, many different people. And while the center and the focus was Black trans lives, there was the presence and the resources, the accountability, and the legwork of those who were not Black trans people, just sort of take the labor off of us. And I think that for me is an educational framework where there is a need for us to sit down and say, Fran would come to us and say like, hey, what do you think of this? And we would say, actually, let's do, and there were moments of education that were happening all throughout. And an educational framework requires the presence, vulnerability, and the willingness of those who are not at the center of what the work is. And I think that a liberational framework for me is, I'm not asking for the permission, for the acceptance, for the interest, for the opinion of anyone who ain't Black and trans or who ain't Black, because we gonna get free regardless, Black trans people specifically are the most resourceful people on this planet. So I have no qualms, fears, or insecurities at all in saying, oh, we gonna get free. That was never a question, I think that it's a matter of how many people are now signing up to support our freedom, but there's never a need for anything other than us and ourselves.
Yeah, it's very that. And just as Ianne was talking about, the way we went about this action initially was it was predominantly queer people of color, and a lot of us were non-Black. And so when we came about this, we were thinking about, what is the most important thing we could do now? And it was a mode of decentering ourselves and doing as much legwork and organizing labor for Black-led nonprofits and for Black organizers so that they could be front and center of the action itself and be across every single decision and be across every element of the action, just so that it still was of the movement that we're enlisted to serve. So yeah, I think that, I am not an organizer, at least was not an organizer before Brooklyn Action. I knew, immediately that we needed experienced organizers and Black-led nonprofits on this project. And so I was just so grateful to learn. I mean, grateful to learn even in real time, just with what Ianne just said. Like I'm learning things right now. So that to me is a big part of it. Is just not being afraid to learn in real time.
Well, it's interesting because I think that Ianne, you've brought us something, and Fran, you've brought up something really interesting too. But Ianne, there's something about I'm evoking Malcolm X when he says by any means necessary. And you're like, okay, we're gonna take our freedom. Like we're gonna be free. But in from your work, what are you willing to do, and what should we be willing to do as a community to get free? Are there boundaries?
There are no boundaries.
Okay.
I've lived in the United States now for 26 years of my life, and 26 years of constant, walls being put up around me and people saying, what is or is not. And I mean, boundaries, obviously, there are boundaries as far as understanding when I need to step forward and when I need to step back, right? Because, while I am I have many, names and identities that come along, Ianne is a da 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 da. But but regardless of all that, I still possess privileges, and those privileges require that if there are any boundaries, the boundaries are that I make sure that I'm not always at the center, that I'm always sharing a platform and creating a platform for us all to stand on as Black trans people, for all Black trans people to stand on, for and in the zooming out a little bit to understand that we are all part of a larger fight for all Black lives and all of Black freedom, and so for me, no, there absolutely no, there's, I heard what Malcolm said. Malcolm said by any means necessary. And I said, okay, heard you. I got you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right, got you. Correct. And we shall, I don't think that we have, people are dying.
Yeah.
And there's just no time. There's no time to mince words about it. There's no time to be precious about it. People are dying right now.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah. And we have a duty to fight. Yeah. It is our duty to fight. It is our duty to win. We were given our marching orders. They were very clear. There were no minced words about it. So yes, absolutely. There are no boundaries. By any means necessary, we are going to get free. And that is exactly what everyone is afraid of.
Yes.
It really is.
Well, say more, Fran.
Yeah. I mean, I was so enraptured by what Ianne was saying. I like.
No, I was like, yes.
Boundaries, got it. So, I think that it's. So first of all, I'm very new to understanding a lot about what it means to abolish the police, defund the police, what it means to abolish prisons, all this different stuff. And so I think for me, when I oh, sorry, there's some background noise over here. For me, when I think about boundaries, it's I know, I'm like side-eyeing my roommates right now. It's insistence on the fact that, we will not compromise. I think a lot when you asked when the first time you said ancestors, I immediately thought of Eartha Kitt, a woman who I have tattooed on my body, a woman who is invokes so much of what it means to be continually marginalized and shat on by structures, by men, by systems of oppression. And one of her most beautiful remarks was this notion that someone asked her, would you ever compromise for love? Would you compromise for so-and-so? And she kind of like laughs in his face. And she's like, compromise for what?
Yeah. Compromise for what reason?
Yes. And if you understand, if you read like her biographies, like you read mine, like I have, you just know that she's like gone through shit. Like what on earth would she compromise for? But to anybody who is just hearing, if you only know her from Santa Baby, if you're just seeing this interview the first time, you're like, what a crazy old lady, But it's without context of the different ways that we experience oppression every single day and over and over and over again, and how we're not gonna settle anymore.
because there's a cost to deliberation. Like freedom isn't free.
Oh no.
And I think when we're talking about this present movement, or I go back to like the first, the uprising, at Stonewall, June 28th, 1969. Like there was a cost to that, and I think sometimes we don't want to pay anything. We want to stay comfortable. Even the most oppressed, we're like, maybe we don't want to risk anything because we've risked so much already. There's already been a toll. What else do I need to give in order to get free?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also, let us be clear as well that there is a difference in like those who have historically been oppressed and those who have historically been marginalized. There is a difference between those folks saying, I don't know that I want to give up anything else. Like there's a difference between like those folks saying like, I think I'm gonna take a step back on this one, and those who have existed at the epicenter of privilege for the entirety of their existence and are now just having to kind of confront things that might feel uncomfortable. There is a difference between those two experiences, right? Like if I were to say tomorrow, like, girl, I need a rest, I need a nap, that comes from a very real place because I have understood that there has never been a day that I have walked into a room since I was 4 years old, let us be clear, and even earlier than that. But there's never been a time where I have walked into a room and not had to have access to language that I was not prepared to talk about, right? And we need to be clear about this, that like visibly queer and trans children from an early age, people were calling me a word that referred to who I was interested in having sex with as early as when I was 6 years old. As early as when I was 6 years old, people were placing words on me that were telling me who I wanted to have sex with, and I was 6.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's really let that seep into the marrow of our bones and understanding, right? Like what that kind of tired is, right? What that kind of like exhaustion is. Like that's the real nap. Yeah. That's a nap that you need, and more often than not, it is those people who are at the front and who are at the epicenter of creating blueprints for the fight for freedom and who are often left out, right? That's a different kind of tired. That's a different kind of like, I gotta hang up my coat, I gotta go home, rather than someone who has existed at the epicenter of privilege, who has kind of lived with what W.E.B. Du Bois talks about in The Souls of Black Folks, the veil, right? The veil that white folks have been given from the beginning, where they don't have to see the world as it truly is, right? There's a very big difference in those folks saying, I'm tired. You should be tired. You should be exhausted. You should be putting in the work, and then you should keep going because you got a lot of stuff to make up for.
There's so much like fragility right now, and I call it myself in that as well. But like, there's so many folks that don't understand that if this is the first time they're showing up in this space, that it's hard. Like it's so crazy to me that people are like, oh yeah, this is like really hard, and they immediately give up, and I'm like, it's when you like, if you have a skill set, like if you play the piano, you don't sit down at the piano and are immediately good at it. You're waking up to what it means to understand anti-Blackness or anti-racism in this country. You're going to have some fuck ups. It's a matter of that vulnerability and understanding and reckoning with yourself and doing a lot of self-work in showing up for people. And if it means making mistakes along the way, that's a small price to pay.
Woo, hallelujah.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta get my fan involved. Come on now.
Right. Yes.
It's getting too dewy.
Yes.
Y'all. I can't. I'm not gonna fake the funk.
Don't
I'm not gonna fake the funk. I don't do that. We at the New York Public Library, baby. We don't do that. We ain't gonna have me sweating up here.
So I'm interested because this moment of uprising, this moment of continued movement, it's awakening a new generation of organizers. There are folks getting out on the front lines for the very first time, and taking on these roles, using voices. They're collaborating, they're talking, they're leading, and I wonder if their organizing looks different than the organizing of the generations before.
It
What's
better.
different? Yeah.
It better look different.
Yeah.
What was I doing all this work for if they just gonna copy what I was doing? I could do it. I'm still here. It better look different.
Mhm.
The babies are so brilliant. The babies are so brilliant.
Yeah.
I believe in the babies every time, every time. Like I think that we have to reckon with the fact that we are raising a generation who have lived on, like there are children who have only known a Black president and then whatever is happening right now. Right, and which is not to like put Obama up on any platform and say like, you know, he was the savior and he did it. Like he was a figurehead in a position of power that has historically been racist in a historically racist country that has done horrible things. You know, but regardless, it is still different when you are a young Black child being raised and seeing a president that looks like you. We cannot deny the effect that has. Regardless of what you learn about this country and about this government and how corrupt it has always been, regardless of what figurehead is in place, you know, I think that it is always important to recognize the relevance of the experience of being a child who is raised up seeing someone who looks like you in like what is considered like the greatest position of power. And then to see like the reaction to that creates young activists, right? I was recently oh my God, I still can't believe I'm saying this, but like, I guess like my little claim to fame right now is that a 12-year-old like trans non-binary child reached out to me and did a whole like project on me. And like to see this young child sitting with their parent and like using like, you know, they, them pronouns and all this stuff. And like to have like, yeah, it was beautiful. But it's like, for me, it's like, that is, and then to also know and recognize, you know, we have to uplift, you know, that young people after Brooklyn Liberation March. I had a mother of one of the organizers of this. Like, these young people went out to the streets and had their own rally for Black trans lives. And the parents said like they were inspired by what we did, right? They need to be different than what we did. Yeah. Please be different than what we did, because we are still making mistakes. We are still getting things wrong, and we have to, right? Because if we're gonna act like the struggle for freedom comes with step 1, step 2, step 3, we ain't really trying to get free, right? Like we are working off of the information that we have been given from our elders and our ancestors, and we are building in that way. And it is our duty to pass this work on to the next generation, because at some point I need to become irrelevant. You know, I'm still 20, I'm still 26. Please get, you know, babies, give me a couple years. You know, I understand, but you know, it is necessary for us to become irrelevant, because we do not have to live in the world that we're handing off to these babies. Yes. Eventually, we will not be a part of this world, and these babies need to be taking control of things and making things happen, and they already are, right? So I think that is, it better look different. Let me say to all the young people, you better make it different. You better do better than I did. I didn't work this hard for you to just do what I did. I would do it myself, you know, and they already are not. Already the babies are smarter than we are, utilizing media in ways that we never would have thought of. Like, the babies are just fine.
If it will be my job to make sure actually that you're never irrelevant, because I'll start your institute and maybe statues in your honor to replace all the ones that we have of Christopher Columbus right now. So
that would be a gag.
Yeah, so I actually will make sure that you're never relevant. But to expand on that, I mean, to use what I hope is a perfect imperfect example, I once saw Larry Kramer speak after a screening of How to Survive a Plague. And I'm using this sample because Larry Kramer was a very imperfect activist, complex figure who took up a lot of space. I mean, we could spend a whole other hour talking about Larry Kramer and what he did to the movement. Regardless, something that he said at this talk is someone said to him, someone asked, if, you know, we get a vaccine for HIV, everyone's, you know, taken care of, and all the work is done. What would you do? What would you go on to do yourself? And he says, the work will never be done. The work will never be done. And, you know, we hope and know that our work will have tangible, concrete triumphs and things that will overcome and get more and more in for our different communities and causes. but there will always be someone standing in our way, and we can't sit in complacency at any point and clap our hands and say it's done, just the same way that we did our action on Sunday. And, you know, a lot of press get on interviews with us and they say, oh, this is such a turning point. This is so exciting. This is, how do you feel about the movement now? And it's like, it is a really exciting pivot. It was a highly visible moment, but it is a truly a small step and just the beginning in what it means to make Black trans lives visible and as visible as possible in this movement and a part of this movement.
And I think I also want to add to it that I think that, you know, so often, like, we have conversations and we sort of inevitably sort of fall into like this idea of like this American individualism, right? And this idea that we have to strive, right, all by ourselves. And I think that as organizers and activists, it is essential for us to understand that we are not running a solo race, we are running a relay race. And so part of, you know, when we talk about, you know, for example, like things like self-care, it's like so much of the reason of that, why like people get so worn out with the movement, or one of the many reasons, is because we're trying to run everything by ourselves. And we have to understand that, like, what is this work if not in community? What is this work if I cannot if I'm running this by myself? I'm just trying to get Ianne free. I'm not trying to get everybody free. I'm just trying to get Ianne free. And so it's like, I have to be able to hand off the baton to somebody else, and that is why we have these conversations. That is why it's important that we have intergenerational conversations, not just between us and the babies, but us and our elders, so that we are learning and then passing on that leadership and that lineage. And that's actually something that we were missing from the Brooklyn Liberation March, which is that we could have had more of an elder presence. And and also within that is the reality that, like, you know, so much of our organizing as millennials is that we are organizing through social media. Right? That's how we do so much. That's how we get the word out. That's how we, like, find people. You know, and so I think that reckoning with, you know, how to balance both like social media and how to make sure that we are speaking to elders in a way that makes sense to them, that they can be present, that they can make their presence known, and they can show up. And then after that, you know, I don't know, maybe the babies will have, you know, flying cars that we have to figure out. We're gonna be like, I don't know what them kids is doing. They up there flying around and all, but you know, I don't know what it is that, like, I don't know what is coming next, but whatever it is, it gives me hope, as long as we are all still talking to each other across the spectrum of age and time.
Yeah. Well, the question that comes up for me around eldership is how do you stay in a relationship to your elders in this work? You know, because we talk about this and in the generation, it's like, it's so easy for us to forget that people have come before us and that those people are often still alive, you know, waiting to be invited, but also needing support to come into how the work has shifted since their generation. So how do you model that for the young folks?
I don't do it enough. I need to do it more. Like, it is absolutely a place where I am missing a lot of work. There are many elders who I know and who I share space with and who I adore. And I think that, you know, as I have kind of, I think that when it's interesting, because I think that when I lived like in Birmingham, Alabama, where I'm from, and then when I was in like Illinois, I tended to spend a lot more time with elders. That I was always kind of like the young one who was hanging out with all of the older folks. And now I find myself moving into a different position where it's like, you know, the average lifespan of a Black trans woman is 32 years old. And so in some ways I am moving into eldership at 26. And because queer eldership and cis hetero, like, you know, eldership are two very different things, you know? And so in some ways I am, while I am still very young and I'm not trying to say that I'm already an elder, I think that if we look at, like, you know, the common lifespan of a Black trans woman, I am getting close to, like, you know, at 32, I'm not supposed to be here anymore. Now, I intend to still be here, but, you know, recognizing that, I think that, like, I'm having to do the work to understand, you know, how can I continue to work with my elders? How can I continue to, like, you know, make sure that I leave my legacy behind as well, you know? And it's something I already had to think about at 26 years old because of our average lifespan. But as far as that work, I need to do better.
Yeah, I definitely echo and say it's something that I'm working on as well in my own work and in my life space in the past, like almost decade that I've been working in queer and trans media. I think about, when I was back at Out Magazine, we were kind of radically re-editorializing what that kind of magazine stood for. And our first kind of big step was putting Miss Major on the cover with Tourmaline. And there were a lot of learning experiences in that, all of which were very positive ones. And something that I always remember from that I just take away was like, when we have elders in our lives, these living legends in our lives, we always put them on pedestals. We post Instagrams about them. We quote them, we cite them, we do all these things. But we never ask for what they need. And I think it's, for me, it was a learning lesson, but also just thinking about how we interact with people in general. It's just like, just talk to them like humans and ask them what they need. I think we always kind of tend to treat them, and they're always giving wonderful unsolicited advice throughout, but like sometimes we treat them like these faucets just deliver us all this information and wisdom and stuff that we're learning from without actually asking them if they have any actionables for us, if they need to be treated a certain way, if they what kind of like their next work is. And when I think about the way Ianne spoke at our at our rally, it was kind of my and the securities team's job to make sure that she was treated like a fucking queen. Am I allowed to say fuck? I'm so sorry. It was truly, and like getting a security team in place for her and making sure that people were away from her as we escorted her up to the balcony and getting her food, getting her water, making sure she was comfortable, all this different stuff. I think that to me, it starts there. Yeah.
I remember I just have this thought of Mother Sylvia Rivera at the end of her life. The ways in which she was so often forgotten, in the work. And I have this quote from her. I just want to evoke her in this space as one of our elders as well. And she says, quote, "I was a radical, a revolutionist. I am still a revolutionist. I'm glad I was in the Stonewall riot. I remember when someone threw a Molotov cocktail and I thought, my God, the revolution is here. The revolution is finally here." And our people who were at the forefront of this uprising, and the ways in which, in many ways they were forgotten and also, revived and celebrated, but the ways in which we can forget the elders, and then we find ourselves after they've passed going back and reclaiming them and reclaiming their lives, and one thing I hear us talking about is like, how do we do that now? How do we celebrate Miss Major, right? How do we celebrate the elders who are still here, who still need basic resources? So I wanted to kind of transition a little bit into something that's incredibly important for movement work, for the work of the revolutionists, which is self-care. And I remember Mother Audrey when she says, quote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." And how do we care for ourselves? How do we care for ourselves? How do we care for others? How do we create a collective of self-care? This is a lot. There's a lot. Fran, you want to go first?
I'll just start by saying that's something I'm learning how to do as well. I do a terrible job at it. I care with work. I was trying to take a vacation when West Dakota called me for this Brooklyn action. I was like, I'll give you 150%. What do you need? I've been working in solely to uplift and amplify the work of LGBTQ people for the last 9 years. And in a lot of ways, I really struggle with work-life balance because my work is the most life-giving thing that I do. And it makes it tough to take a step away from it, because if literally anyone asks me for help, I will. If there's someone who is within my network, within my community, and they're queer or trans, it's just what I do. So I guess it starts with, you know, taking some mornings off here or there, you know, booking massages when we're not in a pandemic. I think that self-care can be such a buzzword, you know, and it's important to note that self-care does not mean only caring for yourself. It also means taking account for the people in your life who have as much impact on your own self-care as they do. So that's something that I've learned.
I think self-care for me, and it's interesting because I don't think until this moment, until I was called upon to speak on it here at the New York Public Library, that I really have like sat with myself in a different way, because I think before I'll give kind of the usual answers of like, oh, like, you know, drawing firm boundaries and, you know, making sure that there are days off and things like that. But I think that something that's occurring to me right now is a new way to think about self-care, which I think I've been sitting with, but haven't yet like brought into words, which is that I think that self-care is a lot about like being really intentional and being really mindful. And what I mean by that is that, like, you know, I have to understand that if I'm taking, you know, like, for example, I have been, you know, for the past month, like, you know, I've had to deal with a racist landlord. I'm having to move in like a month during a pandemic. I've been having to like also self-isolate and be away from like human touch. And I am a triple Leo with a rising Sagittarius. There's a lot of fire and a lot of need to be like touched and like given attention. And so I think that, you know, so in many ways, I've been for most of this time, especially as like, you know, Ochre Project and me like gain more like access and attention. Like I have been like starved for a lot of the things that make me feel, that fill me up, right? Because for me, in many ways, like, you know, I like, but before I would answer this is like being with my friends is my self-care, being with like the people that I love. And now that I don't really get to do that in the same way, it's like I've had to really reshift to look at like what that actually looks like for me. And so I think that what self-care for me in that mindfulness, in that intentionality, right, is understanding, because sometimes we just a little bougie and we got to let our bougie out, you know? And sometimes you just like, yes, like we're anti-capitalist, but also sometimes we just like to have little things, you know? And it's okay to want those little things. And I think that part of mindfulness in like being mindfully bougie, being intentionally bougie, right? I think is a matter of like understanding, if I'm getting this particular thing, what does this serve? In this moment, it is bringing me joy. If I am joyful, I feel more able to do the work. If I feel more able to do the work, I feel more able to serve the people, which is not, and to be clear, when I'm not advocating that like, you know, the work is now going to, you know, get yourself, you know, a new little fit or something to look really cute for, like, you know, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is like, if I have like, you know, if I have gone without for like a long period of time, and I have now an opportunity to have something, right? I should be leaning into that moment. I shouldn't have the, you know, that shame of like, you know, honoring the fact that it's like, there's been a lot, like my life has literally completely changed over the past month, because of this new attention and this new access. And I feel a great deal of like shame around that attention that's now on me, because that's how I was raised. Like, you know, the many abuses and childhood traumas that I have tell me that like, I'm not allowed to celebrate myself. I'm not allowed to be like, bitch, you kind of did something there. You know, look at you. You know, I have not like, even though it's been a week, I really haven't had a chance to sit down and think about everything that we were able to accomplish with Brooklyn Liberation and the short time in which we were able to accomplish it because of all these things. And so sometimes self-care is just being about, girl, you need to take a moment and actually celebrate yourself, you know, and you need to be intentional about why are you doing this in this moment? Are you doing this because you're like a triple Leo and you just love attention? Or are you doing this because you need to take a moment to breathe and give yourself some life and breathe some life back into yourself and celebrate yourself a little bit? Because you can't do this if your cup is empty, right? And so I think being mindful and intentional about like how we are utilizing self-care, I think is a really important part of it, is understanding, you know, if you're buying a massage, great. But if you had like 17 massages, are you still buying a massage for self-care, or is that just are you just being unintentionally bougie?
That part.
I'm not calling you out, sis. But you know what I'm saying? But I think that, you know, it's like there is a level of understanding, and like, you know, I think like, you know, something for me also is recognizing that, like, just as Fran was saying, like self-care isn't just about the things you do for yourself, it can also be things you do for other people. And I think part of that is also, if I'm saying yes to everybody, am I still doing that? Is that still part of like a self-care? Is that still me like giving back to the community? Or is that me not knowing how to draw boundaries, right? And is that me like feeling afraid of what people will think of me if I say no, right? And so I think being intentional and mindful about like all the ways in which we're moving, so that when we say like, you know, I'm gonna say yes to this thing, even if it does add to my stress, I know that in the end, right, it will be a part of my self-care because it will feed back into me. And so I'm willing to be a little bit more like stressed as far as like my workload, because I know that it'll feed back into me and I will therefore be feeding back into the community something good, something that feels good. But if I'm just doing things because I don't know how to say no to stuff, that's not my self-care. And that's not caring for the community either.
So there's a level of self-indulgence that we can step into, which becomes counterproductive to the care of the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that we have to be intentional about naming when we are indulging in self because self has not had, like we have not like taken care of our inner child or our outer child, you know? And when we are being self-indulgent because it just feels good to live in self-indulgence. And drawing really firm boundaries with ourselves around that, I think is part of that process of like having truly transformative self-care that feeds back into the movement and feeds back into community and into ourselves.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, for pulling out that fan. I know.
I
know. Ooh, honey, let me tell you.
See, let's just take a moment. Everyone hydrate. This is our self-care. We need to hydrate. We need to fan ourselves.
That's right.
Living in a state that doesn't believe in central air is an abomination. I don't know what you Yankees are doing, but they have lied to you. It is a falsehood and a fallacy. Get out while you still can.
This is a good time to start transitioning into some of the questions that we're getting from folks in attendance. A lot of really great ones. And just by the way, we won't be able to get to all of these. So let me just start here. What art and or books are you turning to right now?
Speaking of self-care, I'm reading my friend Adrienne Marie Brown's, which I'm ashamed to say I'm only reading it now. It's a book that I like opened, read a few chapters of, and put down, just now picking back up. So that is a sacred text, and something that I love about her work and how she invokes a book is through gratitude and all the people that paved the way before her. So by way of reading Adrienne's work, you're reading the citations of all the other people that she's sourcing, and then you get into these wormholes of all these other folks that she's interested in and consuming. And so it becomes this really bountiful text of so many different people that either I'm just now learning about or had never dove in before. So pleasure activism comes to mind. I also, I actually have it right next to me. I carry this copy of Pema Chodron's, this little pocket Pema Chodron. And it's something that anytime I have like a crazy moment, I open it up and return to it. And it's usually like only when I'm very frustrated. So like for months at a time, you might not open that book, but for the past few weeks, it's been something that I'm opening a lot, whenever I have a waiting time.
I have, right now, art's purpose has been to sedate me and to make me not think. So nothing that I am absorbing right now is going to be NYPL appropriate. So I will just say that I am not watching or reading anything right now that is making me think. I am watching to sedate myself, to just be like, girl, don't think anymore. Don't you answer an email, don't you do it. And so I could pull, Sister Outsider out of my butt, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that to y'all. I think that, the reality is that like I am eager to return to a time where I have more leisure and more time to like sit with books and art that is inspiring me. I think that, I will say that something that I just experienced, I've been facilitating talkbacks at MCC Theater, and I just watched When, which is a short play written by Cia Johnson as part of MCC's Live Labs. And I had to say that was such a healing and beautiful piece of art to take in. Also, earlier this month, Jordan E. Cooper wrote another short piece called Mama's Got a Cough. And that was another gorgeous piece of theater, online theater that I was consuming that really just brought me so much joy. And so there definitely are like pockets and moments where I'm absorbing like, you know, Black playwrights art and kind of how Black playwrights are reacting to the current crisis. But overall, art right now, art's purpose for me right now is to take me out of the world and take me out of my head. And so no NYPL appropriate material.
I definitely have been numbing my brain as well. That's like when I clock off, it's just like, I mean, I had never watched the Real Housewives franchise before.
I'm gagged.
And unfortunately now, since the pandemic has started, I've completed 5 seasons.
Of which franchise?
Which
So
franchise?
four of New York, one of Beverly Hills.
Oh.
And I'll tell you, anybody that wants to tell me that Real Housewives is trash TV is wrong. I will write you a dissertation about why it is a meditation on capitalism and its effect on the human psyche, the human condition. That will be the next NYPL talk. Thank you.
I'm crying.
Well, this go ahead. Yeah.
Well, no, I will say that I think that there is something. I actually am interested in one day having a talk about like the trash television that we watch, and the ways that like you know, my activist brain sometimes really enjoys. Oh God, okay, I can't believe I'm doing this in front of everyone, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Cancel me if you will. But I've been rewatching Vampire Diaries, which I know is such trash, but I live for it. It reminds me of a different time in my life. And I keep on sending my lover like different like little dissertations, and it's kind of become a thing between us of like the jokes I said where I'm like, you know what? This is just how they treat like feminine women, and they act as if it's like it's giving very like, you know, it's giving very like, you know, white feminist lens, and I don't know where it came from, but like it is but like I think that there is a conversation to be had about how like, you know, sometimes like that garbage television that we watch can actually be really can really be interesting insights into how like, you know, our most based instincts as people. And I guess I just tried to make Vampire Diaries deep to make myself feel better about what I've been doing with my spare time. But you know what, cancel me if you will, but I gotta speak my truth.
Well, you know, this actually leads us into this next question, which is kind of a follow-up, which is what kind of stories representing LGBTQ life do you want to see more of in the media and entertainment?
If you haven't watched Disclosure yet, please watch Disclosure. It's an incredible documentary about trans representation or history of transportation, trans representation and lack thereof. And I think for me, you know, we're just like, if you think about how straight people, white people, cis people have been like making media since like the dawn of time, and it's been mainstream since the dawn of like when it's been, you know, being made. Like queer and trans people have like only been making stuff in the mainstream for like the last few decades. We've been doing it since the very beginning, but like we haven't been mainstreamed until recently. And again, that's just kind of like tiered based on different marginalizations that you come in. And so when you think about, you know, the way we make media, we're really only in like our like toddler years of like making things like Brokeback Mountain and like, you know what I mean? Like this kind of like 1.0 of queer and trans representation media. And I don't know, my hope is that we're kind of like, we would foray into like our horny teenage years and do things that that we're allowed to make mistakes, that we're allowed to be bad, that we're allowed to be adventurers or villains. I'm very interested in also queer mediocrity, because so more often than not, we're always this like, we're this hero, we are this like trumping character, we're a tragedy, we're this like big kind of example. And what about like a trans person sitting on a park bench and like reading a newspaper? You know what I mean? Like there are so many narratives that we don't get yet because we just haven't gotten our share of the pie. So I don't know. That's just some things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that something that I crave for is something that has, you know, been, I think that like, you know, the strongest memory that I have is Patrick Ian Polk's like Noah's Ark, as far as a moment when I saw something on television that while I am, you know, not a gay man and not at all a man, like I still like, you know, there was something in like Noah's flair and in seeing like Black queer people actively choose to love each other, and that not be something that needed to be debated or thought about. Like, I think that in general, something that I am just so tired of seeing is like the constant like bringing on of like Black people into Black queer bodies and Black trans bodies into space, and only ever partnering them with white bodies. I'm so disinterested in seeing any of that. You know, I don't know if anyone knows this, but like we date each other, and it's quite lovely. You know, and there's really like some beautiful stuff that comes out of that. And I think that, you know, we have to always like give a shout out to Patrick Ian Polk and to the entire cast of Noah's Ark, because they truly created a blueprint that like no one was brave enough to really pick up on. I think that I'm really interested in understanding that like that trans is a gender identity, and we have sexual orientations as well, and those things are separate. Our trans women do not all date men. This is one who does not date men. Very proudly and very happily. Please keep them all away from me. You know, except for, you know, trans men. Like, I love my trans men, but like those are the only real men that I acknowledge. But like, you know, beyond that, it's like I think that we need to be in a space where we are seeing Black people, Black queer people, and Black trans people choosing to love each other, because that's a lot of what is happening. That's our lived experience, and I think that, you know, so much of the reason that we are kind of pairing these, you know, white and Black relationships, because, by the way, like interracial doesn't just mean white and Black. It can also mean like Black and Latinx. It can also mean Black and like South Asian. Like, there's so many different like ways that people can like love each other, and for us to kind of just be exploring one version and call that interracial dating, that's not what that is, you know. And we can expand that narrative. I also like agree. Like, I want to see like just queer mediocrity, and just people just like being like completely uninteresting and like uninspiring people. I would love for trans people to finally give bad advice on television, and not to suddenly be filled with like the wisdom of all of our ancestors that gives this, you know, soft, gentle white person their guidance like through whatever menial triviality that they're going through. It's like sometimes we can just give bad advice. Like, and I also like, I would also love to see us return to a portrayal of trans people as villains, and have that not mean that all of us are fucking villains. It's like, you know, I want to see a Black cape. I want to see the Medusa of it all, or something. Like, I want to see the trans woman who comes out and like, listen. I also, can we like the campaign for Dominique to be Storm must happen.
Yes.
Oh my God, Storm. I love Beyonce from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, but Dominique must be Storm.
Yes.
This campaign must begin now, and we cannot stop until it is done. She must be Storm. She would.
That's our next action. That's our next action. We'll work.
Absolutely, Brooklyn Liberation for Dominique, because she deserves. Sorry, what were you gonna say, love?
I totally don't remember. It was not important.
No, it's like Lama. I was saying Lama.
Oh no, I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay.
But since I'm talking now, I noticed that we are almost out of time. So in conclusion, I wonder if there's like just a few last words or something from both of you that you would like to share with folks, you know, something that's on your heart, something you want to just kind of leave with us as we move towards closing up this session.
You know, earlier we were talking about community and how we think about it. And it can, to me, it can be yet another buzzword used to just kind of like float around when we have conversations about organizing labor, about movements. And, you know, as someone who is a community maker, a community generator, and has been for, you know, a while, I think it took me too long to realize that we comprise of communities of cultures and subcultures and subcultures, and that if you know, I'm calling out a very specific group here, but if you take your selfie on Fire Island with like your chosen family or whatever, and like all y'all look exactly the same, that's not a community. A community is a group of people that check you when you're wrong. And in order to do so, you have to have differences. You have to come from different walks of life. And beyond race and ethnicity, there's also class differences that must go into that. There are so many different kinds of people that you need to invite into your circles to help you understand and be a better person and generate what a community is meant to make, which is better people. So yeah, I think that's, and I say that coming from someone who came from who had to learn that, you know, over the last like 3-4 years, dehomogenizing your friend groups and your communities is a part of the work.
I think that the thing that I will offer that is sort of a reaction to that is also that I think that, you know, specifically for Black folks, it is all right for us to gather and have our communities be somewhat homogenous. I'm very protective of like Black folks like right to homogeneity. Ooh, that's a fancy little word. You know, but beyond that, I think that I think that, like, you know, what I would want to leave folks with, and what I've been kind of trying to leave folks with in general, is that I think that we need to begin to commit ourselves. This is such a beautiful moment, and I'm so grateful that I got to, like, you know, sit and talk with both of you. And also, I think that, you know, it is now time for us to move away from panels and conversations and move into making organizing meetings an active practice that we have all over. You know, I'm about, you know, all of us recreating this moment and us thinking out loud together about like what actionable steps we are going to create and how and who we're going to send them to and how we're going to keep folks accountable. Because I think that, you know, it is so easy to get sucked in to the world of you know, of access, of privilege, of whatever it is, you know, and that's regardless of where you are or what's next to your name or any of that. But I think that it is so necessary for each and every one of us to show up in this moment and recognize that the time for conversation has ended and has been ended for a very long time. And so as valuable and beautiful as it is to gather and to talk and hypothesize, we also have to begin to develop like real, tangible, actionable items that come out of every single moment that we gather. Because, I mean, Ms. Rona has proved it is very easy for us to lose everything that we know and everything that we find familiar and find comforting. You know, we should be having this moment on, you know, some kind of stage or some kind of space, you know, and there should be people that we can look into their eyes and tell our stories to. And we're doing everything through computers. And so we have to be aware that our world has shifted. Things cannot go back to normal. And the only way for us to ensure that they don't go back to normal is that we create actionable steps wherever we go, and whatever conversations we have, that they are always geared towards giving us tools that we are going to use. And I don't know if we're going to be dismantling Master's house, because, you know, I know that's what everyone loves. That's kind of the first step in your activism. But we certainly need tools to. We also need, if we're going to start dismantling, we also need those tools to start building.
And with that, this conversation comes to an end. I want to just express how grateful I am for this space and the gratitude I have for the work that both of you are doing to take care of our community, you know, to take care of yourselves as well. And I just hope and pray that this conversation has been a blessing for everyone who's joined us tonight. And to our ancestors who came to sit with us, to be with us, I offer my appreciation and love to you. Thank you for the work that has led to us having this moment. And I invite you just to return back to where you journeyed from to be with us, knowing that you have held the space for us. And you've taken care of us once again. And may we take care of you by honoring your memory and continuing the work that you began. And so our last thoughts as we end tonight, and this is our closing benediction. Because the rumor is I'm kind of a minister. Anyhow, from Mother Asada Shakur, quote, "This is the 21st century, and we need to redefine revolution. This planet needs a people's revolution, a humanist revolution. Revolution is not about bloodshed or going to the mountains and fighting. We will fight if we are forced to, but the fundamental goal of revolution must be peace. We need a revolution of the mind. We need a revolution of the heart. We need a revolution of the spirit. The power of the people is stronger than any weapon. A people's revolution can't be stopped. We need to be weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass love. It's not enough just to change the system. We need to change ourselves. We have got to make this world user-friendly. User-friendly. Are you ready to sacrifice to end world hunger, to sacrifice to end colonialism, to end neo-colonialism, to end racism, to end sexism? Revolution means the end of exploitation. Revolution means respecting people from other cultures. Revolution is creative. Revolution means treating your mate as your friend and an equal. Revolution is sexy. Revolution means respecting and learning from your children. Revolution is beautiful. Revolution means protecting the people, the plants, the animals, the air, the water. Revolution means saving this planet. Revolution is love. With that,
Come on, preacher.
that's right. With that, I pray that you all are well and taken care of until we meet again. Thank you all.
Thank you.
you.